Hey everyone, just wanted to touch base tonight about Vice. Man, what great television those guys are doing. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, executive producer of everything that's going on right now. First off, welcome to the King's Cast, Jerry the King Lawler's official podcast. Lots of things coming up from Jerry the King Lawler in the upcoming weeks. Tonight, I want to touch on Andy Kaufman. Today, I ended up calling into the show Busted Open, hosted by Bully Ray and Dave LaGreca, because the King has told this story so many times. He's probably tired of telling it, but it was about Andy Kaufman. And what a way to end that show by saying that Andy Kaufman never cashed a check. That is true love for our industry. And let's face it, there's no two other guys today who could pull this off. There's no two other human beings who will ever do this today, tomorrow, not 100 years from now. This is not a one in a million thing. It's definitely once in a lifetime. And this is never going to happen again. And we should be lucky enough that the King is still able to give us even more insight than we've ever had before. I didn't know that Andy had stayed with the King. I can't imagine what that was like. Andy's pretty quirky from all accounts. I mean, we all have our different quirks and idiosyncrasies and all that good thing, all those good things. But these two made magic that will last forever. And I posed the question on Busted Open today. I was just a caller, wasn't a guest, anything like that, just a caller. I posed the question, had Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman not happened, is there a chance that WrestleMania may not have made it? Because as we know, Vince McMahon put pretty much everything he had on the line to make sure that we had WrestleMania, but he incorporated many aspects of the Lawler-Andy Kaufman feud into building up the first WrestleMania. I mean, you had Captain Lou Albano, Cyndi Lauper. All of this was rock and wrestling, which Memphis was doing rock and wrestling many, many years before Vince had even thought about it. But had it not been for Lawler Kaufman getting the national publicity, wrestling was not accepted. I mean, I would go to school and I would be made fun of. I would be saying, everybody, you watch that fake crap, you watch all that junk and garbage, and it's so fake and it's stupid. All of a sudden, I was the cool kid, and people were asking me, hey, did you see that on the news about Jerry Lawler pile driving that comedian and the guy from Saturday Night Live? And all of a sudden, kids had questions for me, and I wasn't so dumb anymore. I wasn't looked down upon, and the houses blew up. I mean, even Evansville, Indiana, which was already doing well. There were so many, I can remember so many times in Evansville, Indiana, where there were well over, 1,500 people in attendance. But once this happened and wrestling truly went mainstream, there's nothing else like it. If you go back and look at the Memphis territory, when Lawler broke, I think, and I hate to say this, but when Jerry Lawler broke his leg, that may have been one of the biggest and best things that ever happened to Memphis, because it allowed Jimmy Hart to solidify himself as the premier heel and never have to basically set foot in a ring. And he built up so many guys around him. He brought in so many people. He put the crown on guys like handsome Jimmy Valiant. Other people would come in and try to take the crown, saying there was a new king. Then the legendary line that was said, which is, what do you do? What do you do with a horse when he can't race anymore? You shoot it. And there's always been some controversy about that, as people have stated. Whether or not Jerry Lawler wanted to hit Jimmy Hart, whether he did it for real, broke his jaw, so be it. I want to ask him that question up close and in person, and maybe sit those two down with one another. But anyway, 1981 turns around. Jerry Lawler makes a comeback from having a broken leg for an entire year, blows up. one of the greatest babyface comebacks in wrestling history. Wins the CWA belt from superstar Billy Graham prior to that. And all of a sudden has a broken leg, has to take a year off. These power heels were built around the Memphis territory. And Lawler comes back, makes his comeback against the Dream Machine, and slowly but surely establishes Memphis, already selling out houses every week. Now, when you look back in time, people say Bruno Sammartino sold the Garden out every month for so much time, and Jerry Lawler sold the Memphis Mid-South Coliseum out weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks in a row. Not every month, but you're talking 4 times a month that the Memphis Mid-South Coliseum would be sold out when there was a big storyline going, or for no reason whatsoever. Hey, good to see you on here. I'm just messing around with YouTube. I wasn't even for sure if it was working or not. I don't know how the audio is. It's great to see you on here. One of the King's biggest fans here. I'm just kind of doing a private test, but talking about, did you perhaps see the Lawler Kaufman thing tonight on Vice? I don't know how much TV you get over there from America, but outstanding. They're doing an outstanding job. And I was going back through some history here when the King broke his leg, made a big comeback. There was nothing like that. And you fast forward another year when the Andy Kaufman thing happened, and there's no 2 other guys who could ever change the face of wrestling like Andy Kaufman and Jerry the King Lawler. Yeah, you got to find a way to watch this. The good thing is Vice is pretty good about releasing their television shows. I would say within a couple of days, because I was able to watch that last show on YouTube just a couple of days later as Vice let it go. But man, it's great stories. I learned things tonight that I didn't know. I always get that from Dark Side of the Ring or an episode like this. I find something out that I never learned before. And I'm just curious how much those checks were. I've always wondered that, and just never cashed them. That's crazy. I asked the show on asked that question on Busted Open to Bully Ray today, and Bully, to his credit, wrestled on the Terry Funk tribute show in Amarillo, Texas, and never cashed a check. Signed by Terry Funk. It's very special to him, and he never cashed that check. So sometimes people do it for the love of wrestling. Sometimes they do it for the love of the person who is at the heart of that show or heart of that happening, so to speak. And I had always heard that Kaufman never cashed the checks. And I bought a lot of canceled checks from the Memphis territory back in the 90s. I have checks signed by, of course, Lawler, Dundee, Dutch Mantell, Austin Idol, Jimmy Valiant, Joe LeDuc. There was even a Terry Funk in there, Harley Race, but never got a Kaufman check. And there was a lot of checks from that era. And I was just hoping I'd get an Andy Kaufman signed check. That guy didn't sign autographs. Kaufman, not very many Andy Kaufman autographs you're ever going to find anywhere. I'm told that he's very private. And Jimmy Hart alluded to that tonight, saying, people would still ask Jimmy Hart for an autograph, and Hart would give an autograph, and Andy Kaufman would just keep on walking. I guess I'm getting the feeling a lot of people are in bed tonight, and but this was such a monumental thing. There's a reason why Triple H calls Jerry Lawler one of the top 5 most influential men in the history of wrestling. And it's this very event, the Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler battles that actually went on for a much longer time than people realize. There was a boxing match. There was Kaufman versus Hart. I remember owning that Television Master at some point, and the match, although not as funny as their pull apart brawl that Lance had to get into and bust those 2 apart, that looked like 2 I don't even know what to call it, two terrible cats trying to fight each other on TV, and they were pushing and battling and everything. But man, you've got to see this if you have not seen this yet. Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman, uh, just amazing storytelling by the King. I love the fact that Jeff Jarrett's in there because Jeff Jarrett's my age and he asks the questions that I wanted to know. And even I love the talk from Dutch Mantel where he said he was watching this as a fan. He wasn't watching this. A lot of times, if you go back, even in Memphis, Louisville, Evansville, those guys would peek through the curtain. And Dutch said, I didn't peek through the curtain while all this was going on. He didn't even want to know if it was real. He didn't want to know if it was a work. He didn't want to know if it was a shoot, but he went out and watched it, not through the curtain, not off the side of the stage. He went out and watched it as a fan. And there will never be a feeling like this again. And I wish I could convey what wrestling was in 1982 when this happened. It was epic. It was incredible. And all I can say is I hope this works. I hope the audio is good because I'm using my daughter's streaming facility here, which explains the Donkey Kong and Minecraft lamp in the back. But we're going to be going back to the King's Castle in November. We shot a couple of hours worth of content, and he answered a lot of questions that I had. I actually had a question about the Joe LeDuc incident that they touched on last week when the King was the first. He was going to be the first guy to go through a table. Now, Memphis still has that right. And the first time any wrestler went through a table was Ricky Morton when Randy Macho Man Savage Powell drove him to the through the table. That was a big deal. And that had never been done before. And of course, it was done first in Memphis, just as most other things do. And all the things that you're seeing in WWE these days have been done in Memphis. And that's where it all originates from. And that's where I'm going to go back, retrace what made me a fan. And I know the King has talked about these stories for 50 years now. I know he's talked about Andy Kaufman for 40 years. And I know he's kind of tired of it. But once he gets going, I think he kind of likes it. So I will leave you with this. Thank you very much for watching this, first and foremost. And all I can say is, man, Kaufman does need to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. He tried to get in there first. That video is actually resurfaced where Vince Jr. interviews Andy Kaufman at Madison Square Garden. And just weeks later, he ends up in Memphis. Things could have been a lot different. Things could have been a lot more screwed up. And WrestleMania may not have made it. And Vince may have lost everything gambling on a pay-per-view with celebrities that people didn't buy. And all I can say is this. We're going to bring out more of this in the upcoming months, upcoming years. As long as the King's going to talk, I'm going to be there with the camera in his face and annoy him. And we're going to have a lot of fun. We are going to learn so much history and how it's interpreted in today's wrestling, how it's being used in WWE, AEW. But let's get Kaufman in the Hall of Fame. Arguably the most influential star in wrestling history. No one has ever sold anything. No angle has ever been sold like Andy Kaufman did it. Staying in the hospital for 3 days. He even conned the doctors. He conned the doctors and nurses into believing that something was wrong and compressed with his vertebrae that required him to be in traction. And they kept him there for 3 days. He paid for it all, checked out of the hospital, went back home, didn't even tell anyone. Didn't tell anyone he was leaving. Lawler, Jarrett, anyone. And that's really selling an angle to get it over. That's crazy. That's genius. That's crazy, and it's amazing, and it lives on 40 years later, and we're still talking about it, and that's why this is the single most influential angle, storyline, happening, and incident that has ever taken place in professional wrestling and in the industry that we love. Long live the King, and forever lives Andy Kaufman. We'll see you soon.